History is filled with warriors, legends, and great battles, but every now and then a figure emerges from the past so unique that their story sounds almost impossible. A foreigner in a land where he should have been nothing more than an outsider, yet he became something far greater, a warrior, a samurai, and a man who defied every expectation. This is the story of Yasuke, the African samurai, a man who walked among the warlords of Japan and left behind a legacy as mysterious as it is fascinating. The first thing to understand about Yasuke is that he wasn't just any warrior, he was an outsider in a world where outsiders rarely thrived. Born in Africa, likely in present-day Mozambique, he was taken from his homeland as a young man. Whether he was enslaved or entered service voluntarily is still debated, but one thing is certain, he ended up working under the Jesuit missionaries in the 1570s. These Portuguese missionaries traveled the world spreading Christianity, but they also served as traders, diplomats, and sometimes opportunists who found themselves entangled in foreign conflicts. When Yasuke arrived in Japan in 1579, brought there by an Italian Jesuit named Alessandro Valignano, he was unlike anything the Japanese had ever seen. Japan in the late 16th century was a land of war and upheaval. It was the era of the Sengoku period, a time when powerful warlords, daimyo, fought for supremacy, their armies clashing in brutal battles as they sought to unite the fractured country under their rule. At this time, Japan was still largely closed off from the outside world. Foreigners were a rarity, and an African man of Yasuke's stature was beyond rare. He was unheard of. The average Japanese man of the period was relatively short compared to Yasuke, who was described as tall, strong, and incredibly imposing. His dark skin fascinated the Japanese, who had never seen anything like it before. Stories say that people even tried to scrub his skin, thinking it was covered in ink. Word of Yasuke's arrival spread quickly, and soon it reached the ears of one of the most powerful men in Japan, Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga was not just any daimyo, he was a ruthless, ambitious warlord with a vision to unify Japan. He was known for his brutal military tactics, his willingness to adopt foreign technology like firearms, and his deep curiosity about the world beyond Japan's shores. When he summoned Yasuke to meet him, no one knew what to expect. The moment they met, Nobunaga was intrigued. Unlike others who treated Yasuke as a mere curiosity, Nobunaga saw something more. He saw a warrior. He questioned Yasuke, testing his intelligence, his strength, and his loyalty. It is said that Yasuke spoke some Japanese, possibly learned from the Jesuits, and this only deepened Nobunaga's interest in him. The warlord saw potential in the African warrior, and instead of treating him as a servant, he did something no one expected. He made him a samurai. This was an extraordinary honor. The samurai were the elite warrior class of Japan, bound by a strict code of honor, loyalty, and discipline. Becoming a samurai wasn't just about fighting skill, it was about status. Most samurai were born into their position, inheriting the right to wield a sword and serve a lord. For Yasuke, a foreigner, to be granted this rank was almost unthinkable. He was given land, servants, and a katana, a symbol of his new status. Nobunaga even made him his personal bodyguard, a position of immense trust. This was no token gesture, it meant that Yasuke had proven himself as a warrior. Yasuke fought alongside Nobunaga in battles, standing among Japanese warriors as an equal. Imagine the sight, a towering African samurai clad in armor, wielding a katana, charging into battle beside one of Japan's most powerful warlords. The idea still seems surreal today, but in the chaos of Japan's warring states, it was very real. But Yasuke's rise was as swift as it was short-lived. In 1582, the tides of war took a sudden and violent turn. Nobunaga, the man who had taken Yasuke under his wing, was betrayed by one of his own generals, Akechi Mitsuhide. It happened at Honnoji, a temple where Nobunaga was staying with only a small guard. Mitsuhide's forces surrounded the temple, catching Nobunaga completely off guard. Rather than be captured, Nobunaga did what many great samurai did in the face of inevitable defeat. He committed seppuku, ritual suicide. Yasuke was there. He fought to defend Nobunaga, but there was little he could do against an overwhelming force. When Nobunaga fell, Yasuke retreated, making his way to Nobunaga's son, Oda Nobunaga. The young heir tried to fight back, but he too was overwhelmed. Yasuke fought bravely, but in the end he was captured. Now this is where Yasuke's story becomes murky. Akechi Mitsuhide, the man who led the betrayal, chose not to execute Yasuke. Why? Some say it was because Yasuke was seen as an outsider, not truly Japanese, and thus not worth executing like a true samurai. Others believe he was sent back to the Jesuits, returning to the foreigners who had first brought him to Japan. After that, Yasuke vanishes from history. No one knows what happened to him. Did he return to Africa? Did he stay in Japan, living a quiet life? Did he die in obscurity? The records do not tell us. Yasuke's story is unique, not just because of what he achieved, but because of what it represents. He was a man who defied the rigid boundaries of his time. He came from Africa, journeyed across the world, and became something no one could have predicted, a samurai in the service of one of Japan's greatest warlords. His existence challenges the idea that history is simple, that cultures never mixed, that warriors came only from certain lands. He was a symbol of how the world, even in the past, was interconnected in ways we often fail to imagine. Some have dismissed Yasuke as a footnote in history, a mere curiosity. But his story has endured, not because of what he failed to achieve, but because of what he did. He earned his place as a samurai, not as a servant or an oddity, but as a warrior. And while his fate remains unknown, one thing is certain: Yasuke's name has not been forgotten. Even now, centuries later, his legend lives on, inspiring books, films, and imaginations. The African samurai, the man who should never have been, but was. His story reminds us that history is never as simple as it seems, and that sometimes the most unlikely figures leave behind the most unforgettable legacies.